You've been such a good sport about it all. Good afternoon, everybody, and bless you all for staying this afternoon to listen to the DC story, really. And I think it's interesting, we didn't prepare the presentations together, but there's some consistency in the narrative. So you'll hear some of the same messages that Gary's shared, I think, coming back from an employee's view, though, because at Life Academy, for those of you who don't know, we're the leading provider of financial education and employee engagement strategies in the workplace. A lot of the work that we do is actually across UK PLC. We're completely independent. We don't promote or market financial products or advice services. So it's from an education-based point of view that I'll share some of our insight with you. So the employee's view may post the pension changes may not surprise you. It's different to ours within the industry, and we'll look at the reasons why for that too. Here's George, or Gideon, if you prefer. He's either a hero or a villain, whichever you prefer. But I recall exactly where I was when I found out what had happened in the budget, and it was like it was a seismic impact, I think, on the industry. I think that's fair to say. And ever since, trustees, pension managers, consultants, providers have been debating the outcomes, and it's probably, I think I heard only this week somebody describe it as the biggest change in pensions for 100 years. I've been around that long myself, but I think it's pretty substantial. We'd all agree on that. So what have we learned? Well, pension-wise, your money, your choice. From an employee perspective, the your choice bit is quite intimidating. We in the industry may have come to the conclusion, a fairly broad consensus, that the 45-minute one-to-one appointment that could be taken up by an individual is unlikely to be sufficient to help them to make what are some pretty tough and irreversible choices about retirement. And I'll talk a little bit more later on about financial literacy, but nobody here would be surprised that it's quite poor in the UK across the piece. Stereotypes don't play out either. So with our courses and seminars, we find that where you expect people to be fairly astute, oddly they're not, and where you don't expect it, oddly they are. But base levels are quite low. Life Academy, in the 12 months, February to February 2014, 2015, saw over 6,000 people across UK PLC in seminars, workshops, our open courses, right across all demographic groups, socioeconomic groups, and all areas of industry. So what did we learn from that? There's a cohort of 1,500, and in that cohort we surveyed before all our courses, and there was or workshops, and there was a question which related to whether people were aware of the pension changes and the implications for them. And I just want to show you what data we got back from that. And I've broken it down into demographic groups just to give you some idea. The first is the under 30s. I'm going to focus on this group in particular with a look at a case study later on, so I'll just stay high level at the moment. 13% said they were aware of the changes and the implications for them. We didn't ask them whether they understood it, we just asked whether they were aware of it. The second cohort is what we would term as mid-career, that's 30 to 45, and unsurprisingly, you know, the older end of this age group started to be more aware of pensions. It's a proximity thing, as you'll see, that plays through 45 to 55. It starts to get a little bit more preeminent in the thinking until we get into the over 55s, where they're pretty much there with us, actually, as you'd expect. So I'll come back to what we gleaned from that shortly. So why is that? Well, is it just purely a demographic thing? Is it just age? So the older you are, that you're more likely to be engaged in pension. That doesn't play out. There are some other factors that affect people. And again, our experience is that stereotypes don't play out well in this. So to look at that, I'm going to turn, obviously, to Will Ferrell, the American comedian. If you just take a minute to read what he has to say. Basically, it's context. Things out of context can be disorientating. And what we find is that if you speak to somebody under 30 about a pension out of context, it just doesn't engage them at all. If you speak to somebody over 55 about pension where there's insufficient provision, it can create issues for them too. So it's about being aware of the context. Context effect is a barrier to engagement. Richard gets into every presentation. Have a look at what Richard says. Now, he's got his own island, his own spaceship, so he's one volcano away from being a Bond villain now, isn't he, really? But you can't deny that that makes some basic sense, because as an industry, we are doomed to be complicated. So freedom and choice could appear to be a euphemism for further complexity. Even simplification was complicated for us. So from an employee's point of view, what we've just done with freedom and choice is thrown a whole raft of other decisions for them to make, which they're ill-equipped to consider. That's another barrier to engagement, which is applies actually irrespective of age. This is an interesting one because 2 years ago I was presenting on the great news that we appear to be paying off our debt and increasing our savings. Well, lo and behold, now we've got growth. People have started to go the other way. We've got decrease in household savings, and we've gone back to getting the credit cards out. So people are, inverted commas, celebrating, their pay increases or whatever it may or may not be that's driving this. But what this creates, this immediate gratification for those of you who've got a sort of frame of reference for behavioural finance, is the fact that it's a distraction. Maintenance of debt is a big challenge in this country. And what happens actually, counterintuitively, we come across this quite a lot, is you'll find people with debt and savings simultaneously. So they're maintaining the debt and trying to save at the same time. Back to the financial literacy point. So there's three factors there that, regardless of age, can distract people, can make it difficult for engagement to really take place. So what do we need to do now? What do we need to do going forward? Well, there's two things really. One, we need to engage people earlier, as early as is possible, in the right context, on their terms. And this is where there are some parallels with what Gary said. It has to come from the employee's perspective, the way in which we engage them. And we need to maintain engagement. And there's some issues around both of those, actually. Early career. Here the guys under 30. I've got two of these. Don't understand them, frankly, to be honest. I mean, objectively, they're nice enough kids, but why they have to live with me, I just don't know. It makes absolutely no sense. The challenge that they've got, actually, is the labour market is completely different to when I joined it as a baby boomer. Their expectations of getting on the property ladder, again, completely different to what they were when I was joining starting work. So these guys are more focused on paying off student debt, and no, dad's not going to do it for you, and credit cards, and renting versus buying. Renting now actually is on average £200 a month more expensive than buying a property. So aspirationally to talk to young people about property ownership now seems something quite distant that's becoming quite common. So to put pension in the right context for this group is really important. Get them to consider it in their long-term planning, but recognise that the immediacy of dealing with those other challenges, the aspirational things, is going to take precedent for them. The mid-career group, this is where we start to get, if you recall, we got 37% of people saying they were aware of the pension changes in our survey. This group have started, to accumulate some assets. They're looking at protecting those assets, and the young family element comes into this. So again, it's a moving feast. You need to shift the context of engagement for this particular group, as you do for the later career, which is 50 to 55, let's say, where you've got a group who have started to think about consolidation, who are starting to almost like last bite of the cherry. Am I investing enough? Am I making the right investment decisions? Starting to really consider retirement planning and the goals that exist there, because it's a proximity issue. And finally, the pre-retirement cohort, where you're looking there at transition, and things start to shift to become about more than just money. It's time in retirement, it's loss of status, it's relationships. So again, the context of those messages change. In short, engagement should start early and be maintained throughout the career of the individual. And the messages that are given to individuals around pension need to recognise which group they fall into and where the priorities are likely to lie. This is a case study. The toughest group to engage are the under 30s. There's some in here I can see, actually. I can see you with your hair there and things. The EDF, you'll be familiar with EDF. We engaged a group of under 30s for them. It was a well-being initiative because people don't manage money well. It can have a real effect on their health. It becomes a preoccupation. It can be something that affects performance. And so there's an altruistic / commercial benefit to this, okay? But let's see what happened with them on a broad financial education agenda. There were 43 2-hour workshops, managing finances, savings and investments, and the company pension and benefits. Now, this is high-level, light touch stuff, just like how do you know what you don't know? Okay, so that's where we started with them. 97% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed, essentially, I'll condense that, it was beneficial to them. There are other statistics that came out about views about the employer as well, but it can be done. But again, it was because it was put into the right context. And that's the key thing about maintaining engagement. It's understanding, as Gary said, who you're dealing with, who your audience is, and what works and doesn't. My friend Ashley at the back there is going to play a video for us now, and just give my age away. Ashley, roll VT, I think. Just before I go any further, I was saying to Grant, actually, Grant Law, about this video, about getting permission from Eric Coleman, who's a San Francisco-based social media guru. So I wrote and said, can I use your video? And he went, yeah, great. Great to hear you want to use it. We should meet for coffee sometime. Now, I live in South Wales, so whilst he might be an expert on this stuff, proximity is a problem for him as well, because, unless he wants to pay my expenses, of course. This is the interactive part, actually, oddly enough. Can I have a quick show of hands? Anybody on LinkedIn? Just give me a... Excellent. Twitter? Anybody a tweeter? Facebook? I'm not looking for friends, so it's fine. Okay. It's all pervasive, okay? I saw some faces around the toothbrush, actually. People go, really? Well, what it is, people have more than one device. Be reassured, dental hygiene is not quite as bad as you might fear. But if we think about it and think about our families, and the story I tell, and this is absolutely true, is my daughter, who's now gone to university, I tried to get her to come down for dinner. I kept shouting. In the end, I did it on Facebook and she came down. That's absolutely true. She was upstairs. Okay? Because in the digital space, she was engaged. In the analog space that I was in, she wasn't. So what has this got to do with maintaining engagement? Well, as nice as it is to see you and speak to you like this, it's impractical and sometimes commercially not viable to keep doing this for employers. But Gary talked about innovation, and this is, for me, key, and for us at Life Academy key, is how do people get their information? Have people got tablets or smartphones here today? Just a quick, yeah. Who's been on them more than once today? Who's been using them? Who's been on them while I've been presenting? So. Shame on you all. Shame on all of you. But we get our data on the move, okay, and we get it on under our own terms and conditions. We search for things. The default is Google it. How many people have had that said? I don't know the answer. Who was that guy who was in that film? And somebody goes, well, just Google it. And it just happens. We all just do it. That's where engagement takes place. If we can harness that and use it, pensions will never be sexy, I don't believe. That's a sad thing to say for somebody like me who's been trying to work at it for years. But we really do need to think about using technology in a more creative and effective way. So that's why I've included that. Because in industry, we're conservative with a small c. We need to show a little bit of courage, I think, and push the boundaries. So, in summary then, what have we learned? We've learned at the coalface, as it were, that there are different levels of awareness. One thing I would say positively that's come through is people are now more aware of pension per se since the budget. Some of them misguidedly thinking that it's like a small lottery win and they can just take all the money out. Less than you might expect, actually, are like that. But those varied levels of awareness have told us a story as well about the need to engage people in context, so that's been very useful. There are other barriers regardless of age. There's context, which Will Farrell helped me to explain, so talk to people about pension in the way it's going to make sense and engage them. The complexity issue is something we're not going to overcome easily, but things like decumulation and default don't help. Decumulation isn't a proper word. I've looked in the dictionary, it doesn't exist. And distraction. People will be careless with money. They'll spend money, they'll go for something today, and we have to understand that's a backdrop for them when we're trying to talk to them about making sure they've got enough income in retirement. Guidance alone is not enough. It's a bold statement, and as Gary said earlier on, prediction's difficult, especially about the future. So we'll wait and see, but I don't think that 45-minute interview, if that's what people go for, is necessarily going to help the people that we meet on a regular basis with the financial literacy levels that they've got. So I'm an optimist by nature, but we'll see on that. It's unlikely to play out in its current form, I don't think. What do we need to do next? Engage early. That's critically important. It shouldn't be something that happens when people are coming to the end of their career. So the 45-minute appointment isn't when engagement starts. It should start way, way back, and it should be a continuum, essentially. That's what we need to do. And it's engagement, not just information. I think the industry need to step up to the plate, essentially, and we need to stop trying to pass people off with, as somebody said to me the other day, the scheme booklet just won't do anymore. And Gary reflected on that. We have to engage people and give them a chance to have an interactive relationship around what they're doing. And maintain engagement. And technology, I think, is the key to that. The final point I'll make to finish is that's what we need to focus on the whole time, because if we don't take the employee's view into account and we just do it from an industry perspective, we're doomed to fail. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Brett. Well, you can tell that all's well with the world when a conference starts with a lawyer and ends with a lawyer. So Stephen is now going to pull together many of the DC themes we've covered this afternoon and look at the risks in doing the right thing for members. Stephen's a partner in Evershed's Human Resources Practice Group, specialising in pensions law, and was previously head of the